Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Friday's edition of Take Five. Hey, I hope you're having a great day today. Now, look, we're dealing with the subject that we have entitled "That Sinking Feeling," and we're looking at Peter and his excursion of walking on the water, where he got out of the boat in the storm, walked to Jesus. He got afraid, and his faith failed him, and he began to sink. He cried out to the Lord. Jesus picked him up. He scolded him for not trusting him, and then he walked back to the boat again with Jesus. And of course, what we're talking about are the failures that we have in life. Hey, look, let's face it. Failure is one of those things that is going to be familiar to us many times in life. I know people say, Russ, you shouldn't talk like that. That's too negative. No, it's just the truth. As long as we factor ourselves into the divine equation of God, as long as that human factor's there, the potential to fail is going to exist. And in life, we're just going to do it. You've done it. I've done it. There's no use escaping or trying to escape it and say it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you what, for those folks that like to do all that faith confession stuff, and I believe in having the right words, you can confess failure away all you want to, and you can say all you want to. It's not going to happen. But somewhere along the way, you are not going to hit the mark like you're supposed to do. And that's the times that you need to know that Jesus will pick you up. He loves you. He's going to scold you, but he wants you to walk again. Now, Peter learned four things that you and I, if we will apply them, we would learn the same lesson that Peter learned there that day. Number one, he learned to embrace the correction that God gives. Number two, he learned the lesson that God wanted him to learn. Number three, he learned to forget about the perspective of people. And number four, he learned that God wanted him to walk again. And if we will take those four things and apply them, I promise you, in every failure of life, you will find yourself being an overcomer and having a different perspective about it if you just realize that God has a plan, even in this failure, for your life. Now, these moments of failure happen many times in the life of Peter, and we would do well to learn from his example. Now, I'm going to go over several of them with you today. Look, I'm just going to hit and miss on some of these scriptures. I don't have time to read them all to you, but if you get the church app, the notes are there. You'll find a bunch of these passages. It would do you good to take the time to go and read about these events in the life of Peter and see how he failed in front of God. He failed in front of people numerous times, but each and every time he got back up and walked again. He might have been rebuked and scolded, but he walked again. And that's why Peter became the great man that he became, because he refused to stay down. And that's something that we need to learn. So let's just look at a couple of them real quick. We don't have time to read them all, I'm telling you. There was a time, Matthew 16, when Jesus approached the disciples and said, "Who do men say that I am?" And they gave all their answers there. But Peter said, "I know who you are. You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon, because God has revealed that to you, not flesh and blood." And he changed his name there that day, and he stopped calling him Simon and began to call him Peter, which in the Greek that was Petros, and it meant little rock. Jesus knew that within himself he was the foundation stone, but he was saying there that day, "Peter, you're a piece of me. You are like me that day." And he said, "And I'm going to build the church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against you, and I'll give you the keys of the kingdom, that whatever you bind on earth, you'll be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven," and all of this. And man, this is sounding so good, and Peter's ego is just swelling up there because Jesus is saying such good things. And then Jesus begins to tell them about how he's going to have to suffer a lot of things in Jerusalem and be crucified. And Peter got him by the coat and began to rebuke Jesus and said, no, Lord, this can't happen to you." And Jesus looked at Peter, the guy that he had just blessed, and said, "Get behind me, Satan." No, wow. You talk about a failure. Not only in front of Jesus, but in front of everybody right there. And he got rebuked in front of everybody right there. But again, Jesus did it because he loved Peter and he wanted him to walk again. There was a time after that Jesus was talking to the disciples and telling them what was going to happen. And Peter said, "If everybody stumbles because of you, I will not stumble." And Jesus looked at him right straight in the face, right in front of everybody, and said, "Peter, I'm telling you that before the rooster crows in the morning tonight, you're going to deny me 3 times. Now, Peter tried to play it off, and he said, Lord, if I have to die for you, I'll do that. But it didn't change the fact that this resonated in the mind of Peter and in the mind of the disciples, that here is this guy, here is Peter, who's saying, if everybody runs away, I'll stay with you. And yet Jesus says, no, you're going to deny me 3 times tonight. Man, what a failure this man is going to experience. It wouldn't be very long that Jesus would take Peter, James, and John into the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. And 3 times he would come back to those disciples and they would be asleep. This is Peter, who had this great revelation of who Jesus is. And this is Peter that's saying, Lord, I'll die for you if necessary. And Jesus comes back 3 times and says, man, why are you sleeping? I mean, Peter sounds so much like us. One mistake after the other. And then when they come to arrest him, Peter draws his sword and he takes a whack at one guy and misses him and cuts his ear off. And Jesus rebukes him there in front of the disciples and the guards and everybody and says, put up your sword. Man, I don't need your help. I could call 12 legions of angels to help me if I needed to do that. And you've got to know that Peter right now is so frustrated. What am I supposed to do? I'm just trying here. Failure after failure after failure. Ever felt that way? Well, it didn't stop there for Peter, because that very night after Jesus is arrested, people come to him and begin to ask, are you with him? And 3 times, just like Jesus said, he denies him. And the 3rd time he denies him, that rooster crows. He remembers what the Lord said, and the Bible said he's overcome, and he just goes out and he weeps because he's so overcome there. Peter's life seems to be filled with one failure after another, and the Lord rebuked and chastened him every time. But every time Jesus reached down and picked him up so he could walk again. And this proves that God's biggest concern with Peter was that he got back up after every failure and walk again. That's his biggest concern with you. He wants you to get back up time after time and walk again. Now, you remember Judas, don't you? He was the guy that betrayed Jesus. Well, Peter was just as big a traitor as Judas was. But Judas did not get over his sinking feeling. He didn't get over his failure. Judas betrayed the Lord, and he couldn't handle the guilt of personal failure. And he went out and he committed suicide. He hanged himself and he died. Peter, on the other hand, did the same thing, was worthy of the same death. But Peter got over it because he recognized how much the Lord loved him. And Peter had already determined that walking for God, walking with God, was more important than his failure. It was more important than his guilt. It was more important than what people thought about him. Let me tell you something, friend. The way you and I, the way we approach and the way we react to the sinking feelings of life will determine whether or not we'll walk again, or we'll do like Judas and commit spiritual suicide. Let me encourage you, friend. Cry out to Jesus. He'll pick you up. He'll scold you, but get up and walk again. That's what God has in store for your life. Well, hey, it's been good being with you this week. I look forward to being with you this weekend in worship, and then Monday when we start a brand new series of Take 5 devotions. Until then, God bless you. Have a great weekend. Remember this, friend. Trust the Lord. He will never fail you.